number of people and participants here today. And in order to keep things organized, we're going to have everyone muted. Number two, we know that you guys all have some very great questions for our panelists. So right now, one of the SPN staff members is going to be dropping a link to a Google form. This is a form where you can submit your questions, and in the last 30 minutes of today's event, we'll be asking these questions directly to our panelists. And number three, everyone will receive the contact info, email address of the panelists so that you guys can stay in touch after. And lastly, we highly encourage everyone to please turn their cameras on so that we can see all of your beautiful faces. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. They all have very long and impressive bios, so I'll just read the main couple points. First up, we have Aman Bhutani. He is the CEO of GoDaddy, which is a publicly traded company. He is the board member at the New York Times Company and the former president of Brand Expedia Group. Next, we have Diviapreet Singh. She is the co-founder and COO of Diem, which is a social space for women-centered communities. She's the former product manager at Away and the former product operations and CX specialist at ZocDoc. Next, we have Manpreet Singh. He is the chief investment officer at Singh Capital Partners. He is the president and co-founder of Talk Local and employee number one at Profit Investment Management, where he grew assets under management from $20 million to over $2 billion. And lastly, we have Savneet Singh. He is the president and CEO of PAR Technology, another publicly traded company. He is partner at CoVenture, and he's the co-founder and former MP of Terra Holdings, Inc., a holding company of niche software businesses. So to all my panelists, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the first part of our event today, which is me asking all the panelists questions. So panelists, you all have such a unique experience of serving organizations at a very high level. Could you tell us a little bit about the arc of your career and also give us some insight into a moment or person that was pivotal for you? Savneet Singh, I would love to start with you.
I think my career is probably the worst one to emulate in that it's, it's not been linear at all. So I grew up thinking, I'd be a doctor like, many of my relatives. And then my brother and I stumbled on eBay when we were kids. And so we started selling our baseball cards and basketball cards on eBay. We got really good at it. And somewhere in there, I said, hey, I think I want to do business. So I went to college. I stumbled on Warren Buffett and I got obsessed with investing. And so I went from there to Wall Street and spent 2 years doing investment banking at a big bank. And then I spent a year as an investor. And I think in that year as an investor, I realized that investing on Wall Street wasn't sort of the investing that Warren Buffett did. It was much more short-term oriented. And I think the cultural and values alignment was not there for me. I think I went through a traumatic personal event and I just sort of said, I want to like be my own man. So I went and started a company that I ended up running for 7.5 years. And I left when we were, going through an exit. And so, my career was kind of random. And then from there, I went on the board of a company, then I ended up becoming the CEO of the company. None of this was planned or I ever had any intent to do. So I'd say my career arc is probably the worst one to emulate, and that it's a little random. And it's kind of odd because I was a pretty straight edge, good grades, good school kind of guy. So it's kind of random that, if you ask my family, I think they'd be surprised that I was the one that had that path. On the second part of your question of, formative experiences, I think everyone has, I think different things that impact them. But, I think for me, a lot of my formative experiences actually came really early in life. Your parents, your community, the first couple of jobs that you had, I think that formed a lot of how I looked at the world, a lot of the mental models that I apply today. I've had a lot of random moments. I'll think of them later, but I think you guys are at a very unique time in your life where a lot of what you're learning today, a lot of what you expose yourself to today will still be what sticks with you 20 years from now, because it'll teach you how to think, the integrity, how you treat people, how hard you work. Those processes really stick with you. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome, thank you. Manpreet, same question to you.
Yeah, so I would say my background, I got a unique opportunity very young. My brother and I started an internet website in the late 90s, and it just kind of grew really fast. And so that got me really excited and interested in finance, because I had heard about like venture capitalists. I grew up in the DC area, so I didn't know anyone in finance and didn't know what Wall Street was and didn't know how to raise money. And I literally just went to my counselor as a junior in high school and said, I want to learn about finance and I want to learn how to raise money for my business. And I think she thought I was crazy, but she was like, if you want to learn about finance, you should do something called an internship. I was like, okay, how do I get an internship? She's like, well, you have to call the company and just try to work there, submit a resume. And I'd never done a resume before. And we literally together just picked up a phone book. Phone books still existed back then. And we went to the finance investment section, and a firm name was called Profit. I picked up the phone with my high school counselor, and we called the firm Profit. And I said, hey, I want to work for free. Would you let me come work? And the guy on the other end said, sure, just come by the office and do an interview, and we'll take it from there. So I ended up going there a few weeks later and meeting him. And it's funny because I put one thing on my resume that I think got me the opportunity, which was I put that I was learning how to play golf. And the guy who ended up becoming my boss had never knew how to play golf and was always wanted to play golf. And so he thought, okay, this kid probably knows how to play golf, and so he can maybe help teach me. Little do you know, I still can't play golf, and I never have played well at all. But that's
I can actually attest to having played golf with Manpreet. He's arguably the worst golfer like I've ever seen.
Yeah, so this happened probably, and this is like 99 or 2000, just to kind of give you a time frame. And so he let me come in. I would come, initially he let me come in 2 days a week, Wednesday and Fridays after school. I was doing like a half day schedule. So I would just sit there and like kind of just help him with whatever he needed help with. I mean, it was really opening the mail, like working on trying to put together a spreadsheet or two, getting his lunch. I mean, just the basic thing you expect. I was fortunate to end up staying there the next 12 years. I ended up getting my undergrad degree in 2.5 years while working for him. The firm basically grew 100x in AUM over the next 12 years, and there wasn't many other people in the room to do the work, and so he would ask me to do it. So I ended up learning in the back office, doing research and trading, and eventually learning how to invest. I think taking a chance and doing something for free, and I guess being in the right place, right time, kind of helped me get to that point. I think the next point of my career that was pivotal was, I would say 7 or 8 years ago, we had an opportunity where a very large firm had come in and wanted to buy us, and I had spoke to a bunch of my mentors, and they said, it's one thing being an employee to a firm, is one thing actually becoming a CEO or the owner of the firm. And I kind of wanted to go to the next stage, and I kind of decided that the next path for me to do that was to go to business school. So I ended up going to business school, making a lot of good friends. And so I think that was a very pivotal moment in my life, and opened up my eyes to see what other things are out there and meet a lot of other interesting people and folks that I would end up doing business with down the road. And so I ended up going to business school, and then ended up, deciding a few years later to start a tech company, which I ran for 6 years. And then now I'm kind of on the investing side, which I decided to do a couple years ago. I think there was a lot of pivotal moments across my career that I think made the right decision. And I think you have to make I think it's not usually a good idea to be in one place for a long time. I think especially if you're young in your career and you are given an opportunity to try something new and do something bigger and better, you should probably jump on it.
Awesome, thank you so much. Diviapreet, same question to you.
Sure. For me, I think I spent most of my high school, college life thinking I wanted to be a lawyer or a singer, because I was a musician, and I've always got to have that in the back of my mind. But I always thought I was going to be a lawyer, and I worked at a law firm after college, and I kind of just fell into tech. I had a really great customer experience with ZocDoc, health tech company ended up working at. And I just kind of went with my gut and said, this was a great experience. I was really young, and I was like, this company seems like a great place to work. Cold applied for a job, got the job. And that for me was a pivotal moment for me, thinking, kind of going with your gut. And it was the first place I fell in love with technology, and I fell in love with tech and a startup culture. And because I was an early employee, I got exposure to everything from operations, working directly with a CEO, customer service, and product, which is really where that jumped my career growth, I would say. And then after that, I was there for about 5.5 years, and kind of at an early stage in your career, it's not good to, as Manpreet was saying, it's not great to stay in one place for too long. So I was like, I got to make a move. And I went to a totally different industry. And I worked at another startup where I met my co-founder, Emma. And that's where her and I started playing with the idea of starting our own company. And we kind of just, it was really just natural. We started talking about problems women face, and literally toyed with the idea for a year. And then finally said, okay, you know what, let's do this. Let's take this leap. Let's take this jump, and talk to tons and tons of people. And then just finally decided to quit my job and start a company, which was crazy, and obviously a massively pivotal moment in my life. And I think from that point on, it just kind of fell into place, which was amazing.
Wow, thank you so much. Aman, please.
Thanks, Ivan. Hi, everyone. Great to join you guys. There's so many pivotal moments in any career, and lots of people influence me in the positive direction. But I will slightly restate something Savneet said, because he and I talk a bit, and I find it amusing that he says his is the worst career arc to follow because it's random. In my experience, most of us have random career options. So I'd say if you can follow his, good, just do it. I think it'll work out great for you. But as I look back, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do as a young adult, and going to college, I actually wasn't sure. I was one of those kids that grew up in India, and like many other people, spent years preparing to go to one of the best engineering schools. And unlike many of them, I woke up the morning of those tests after 2 years of missing, my weddings in the family and all vacations and everything, and just studying all the time. I just didn't get up and go for the test. I decided I didn't want to be a software engineer, and that, right, even though I loved working with computers, it's not something I wanted to do. In fact, what I was really in love with, I love technology, but I loved using it in advertising. And like my first love was actually in the advertising space. Through a random series of events, similar to how the others described, I ended up doing economics because you had to do some bachelor's degree, and economics sounded good enough. Spent some time in college doing that, most of the time trying to drop out and just go into advertising. And the world works in mysterious ways. I ended up not going into advertising and coming back and writing code for a living, and just fell in love with it again and did that for a few years. I did go to business school pretty young, but unlike some of the other folks, panelists, as they talked, I did start a company in 1999. It was a terrible time to do a startup with the market crashing, and it was a tough time. We did that for 2-3 years, but after that, I ended up joining Washington Mutual, and I learned something very different being part of corporate America. The last 20-ish years for me have been about growing through the ranks and understanding every level of the company, first in technology, then in product, then in marketing, and sort of one function at a time. And if I had to point out one pivotal moment where it all sort of got clarified for me, and I'll probably end up sharing 2-3 items as we talk today, but one important moment was that there's a moment in time I remember that I felt that the path to being successful was the what was actually really simple, and it was the how that was difficult. And the what simply is that you have to be able to do things that other people are not able to do. And if you're able to do that, you absolutely do well in the first phase of your career. There's no doubt about it. And the second phase of your career really hits with a similar thing, which is at some point as a leader, you've got to be able to help people believe that they can do things that they don't believe they can do. And when people around you start doing that, then it pushes you into sort of success in the second phase of your career. And sort of unlocking those two simple ideas were huge for me. So those are a couple of things that I talk to young folks about. Too often we don't persevere. We all have grit. We all have talent. We all have skills. We have the ability to learn. We live a life of abundance. If you're on this call, you're unbelievably gifted compared to the opportunities that most people in the world have, right? But often we don't apply ourselves hard enough. And if we know that we can get there, and if we know that we have to actually achieve things that others weren't able to, and we have to look at things differently, then it can continue to press us on, and we can do unbelievable things. And I'll probably end up telling you a couple of ridiculous stories that you won't believe happened, just because I thought, what could it hurt? I'll try this, and it turned out great.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Aman. So moving on a little bit, we all know that you guys have titles: CEO, COO, founder, etc. But a lot of us don't really know what that actually means, what work that actually entails. So I would actually love to start with Aman. If you could walk us through a day of your life, what is it actually that you do?
Yeah, well, today for me is about spending some time with you guys, and a little bit of my day is spent with new CFO and chief legal officer candidates, because I have two senior leaders in the company that are retiring. They've been with the company a while. So I'm hiring for two of the biggest roles at the company, and often the way to find the time with folks is to find it on Saturdays. But I think it's hard to look at any one day on the calendar. People have been asking me this question a long time. When I used to do internal sessions, I would literally on Zoom or on the projector, I would pull up my calendar and say, let me just show you what it looks like. And it's a hodgepodge of things, because as the CEO, you don't plan in terms of days. You plan to outcomes. And those outcomes then determine quarterly focus, they determine yearly focus, 3-year focus. Then you work back to where you spend the time. So in terms of what your day looks like, you're going to, and I'm sure the other leaders will share, of course you end up dividing your day against your major stakeholders, the work that you're doing for customers, whether it's your product, your marketing, the improvements there. You're going to devote some amount of your day to your employees. You're going to the operations and how things work and how execution happens. And you're going to devote part of your day to your shareholders, your business model, your strategy, and those pieces. And now more and more a part of your day is going to go, at least as a public company, to sort of this, I'd call almost a fourth bucket of stakeholders, which is ESG, environment, social, and governance. So your day is going to divide into those things. But what's important is that as CEO, you have the opportunity to do anything you want to put your energy into. So the most important thing is, how do you prioritize? How do you put your day, what do you put your energy against, and how you made those decisions? How do you look back and decide whether you focused on the right things or not, right? But my day ranges from spending 5 minutes on live TV, all the way to, doing learn sessions with the team deep in the weeds, looking at, why this product doesn't work for our customers. It can be a very, very varied set of things.
Yeah, thank you. Diviapreet, what does a day in your life look like?
Sure. Similarly, I think it's really hard to predict what my days are going to look like. My startup it's a startup. We're much smaller. We're a team of like 15 people. It's not huge. And so oftentimes my day is just very chaotic. And you're kind of just doing every job. You're not just doing one job. Every day I'm the tech founder. So I'm usually checking in with engineers, software engineers, literally keeping our product on track or our roadmap on track, or if things are getting off track, working with my team, dealing with investors. I think especially as a small company, it's like, so that's like one of the most challenging things I think people don't emphasize enough, but it's really, really, really hard in dealing with investors. And then also, we just got out of an incubator program, Techstars, which is a very aggressive program that keeps tabs on you, and they're always having to meet with them on a regular basis. And I think, and then a lot of times I like to check in with our users and make sure I'm like in the customer service, queue, talking to people, getting advice. I think that's so important, especially as a tech product, is making sure that you are connected with your users and you understand, because that just helps you, develop a better product if you understand what your users are saying and the problems they're having. And then of course, spending time with my team, mentoring my team, guiding them, make sure they are focusing on the right things. But I think because I am a smaller startup, it does mean that I have to have my hands in every single thing. My co-founder and I work really closely together. So a lot of times it does mean that I have to be really, really in the weeds in 1 minute. And then the next minute I have to like take a step back and say, okay, but where are we going to be in a year, and try to explain that to an investor. And that's the hardest thing, is like every hour I have to like switch to a different brain. And so it's always a little crazy, but fun. That's what kind of my day in my life.
Yeah, so in the interest of time, I'll be moving on to the next question. And Manpreet, I would love to start with you. So a lot of our audience members are, whether in college or business, or junior business roles, or even high school, they're just getting started. So what is some practical advice that you would give, and maybe some pitfalls that you wish you had avoided at a young age that, have helped you get to this point?
In terms of advice on tips, I think jump at the opportunity you're given, right? So if you're asked to do something, try to do it. Try to do the best job you can at it. If you don't know how to do it, spend all night and call your friends, call anyone you know to help you get it done, because it just makes you look good the next day, right? I think that was very important in my career, because I always stepped up even when I didn't know how to do it, right? So I would definitely recommend that. In terms of pitfalls early on, I would say don't get comfortable, right? I think that's probably one of the lessons that I would recommend to a lot of young people, is like you start to do well in one thing and you just think, oh, well, I should just do this forever or just for a long time period. But you have to try new things, right? To go up the ranks in these organizations, you have to do product, you have to do marketing, you have to help recruit talent, you have to help drive sales, right? I think sales is one of the key areas where I recommend young people spend a lot of time in, because if you can convince someone to buy something, you can probably convince almost anyone to do anything, right? And so that can help you down the road, whether it's fundraising, whether it's hiring talent, whether it's convincing a large partner to work with you versus working with a large player like Goldman Sachs, right?
Yeah, thank you. Savneet, same question to you. What advice would you give, and maybe some pitfalls that you wish you had avoided?
I think the best I can give you, there's a lot of work hard, all that stuff, but is to find something you're sincerely interested in, as opposed to doing something that sounds right, or you're doing for some external expectation, your parents, you think you have to because you make a lot of money. The people in my life who've been the most successful are the ones who actually went into a field they were really into, no matter what it was. One of my friends became, he was just really into basketball, and he went and, after college he went to work for the Phoenix Suns, and we were like, oh my God, you make like no money, you're like always borrowing money from us. 10 years later, he became the youngest general manager in basketball history. And he never did it for the money, right? He did it because he was really into it. And I think, later as you get older, you realize that it's you envy the people who do what they love, as opposed to people who make a lot of money. And so my biggest piece of advice is find something you're really into. Don't do something just because you have to. And if you don't know what you want to do, then I would experiment liberally. Like, you have this amazing opportunity to intern and try different companies, try different fields. My great regret was, I was so obsessed with trying to get the best job, the best school, that I think sometimes it would have been great to go work in a restaurant. It would have been great to go try something in the medical field or something like that. I think I went on that one very aggressive path. So that was probably the one thing I sort of regret. I didn't get to study abroad because I was like, oh, I got to go to the Goldman Sachs internship, and I got to go here, and I got to go Harvard Business School, and blah, 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 blah. So those are two things I'd say: is find something you're really interested in, you're not, then experiment liberally, because you unique time in your life where you can actually try different things.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to move on to the next question. Aman, this is actually one question that was submitted directly for you. So as the CEO of GoDaddy, I'm sure you've had to make decisions that weren't very well received, or had a less than positive outcome. So what were some lessons and takeaways you've gleaned from that experience?
Yeah, you're always going to make decisions as leaders that some people are not going to like. And sometimes you'll make controversial decisions where your entire team is going to not like it, because as the leader, part of your role is to be predictable, and you want your teams to be able to know how you land on things. But if you're always predictable, then you'll never go against the grain, and groupthink takes over. So, often as the senior leader, you have to push against things that become legend in the company, or people just start believing, and they're just not true. In terms of the things I've learned, I would say I have to do one of these every month, if not more, that become big issues. As the CEO of a public company, a lot of those a lot of those times those decisions become public as well. It's not just about internally them being issues, they become big PR items. And the basics of how to handle those or what you learn haven't changed much in the last 20 years for me. Um, one is be transparent, just be clear about what you're saying, be clear about why you're saying it, be true to your core. Don't take words from somebody else and publish it. When my head of comms, who worked with the biggest CEOs on the planet, she worked with Larry Ellison at Oracle, she worked with John Chambers at Cisco, and the previous CEO of GoDaddy convinced her to come to GoDaddy. She's better at comms than anybody I've ever met. But when she sends me something that she thinks I should talk about, or a message that I have, on top it stays in one line always. She says, "I'm just writing a draft. As always, I know you're going to change every word, and I'm fine with it." Because it's, never represent what somebody else's point of view is. Whatever you're saying, make it aligned to your core, and have good reasons. Don't do any shortcuts. When you make a controversial decision, make sure you understand how you made that decision. And if you don't know how to make decisions, then first learn how to make good decisions, and then make the decision. Because there's a path and a process with experience. You learn how to weigh the options carefully before you go out and do it. And that allows you to look around a lot of corners that other people who are going to attack you don't always do all the homework on, because they're eager to attack you rather than truly understand the decision. But if you've done the work, you can sort of smooth those over very quickly, and you don't have to make anyone feel bad, and everyone can save face, but you can get the thing moving even though it becomes controversial.
Yeah. So one of the things that we see over the years in business and entrepreneurship has been, I think, a consistent underrepresentation of women and people of color. So Diviapreet, I would love to ask you, does this affect a company's ability to work effectively? And have you ever felt pigeonholed into certain types of roles because of your background, and how you navigated that?
Sure, absolutely. So I think for me, obviously now it's a little different. I founded my own company and it's very focused on women. So it's a little different right now, but I think previously, and I mean, I definitely deal with it a bit now, dealing with investors and stuff, but I think from a practical sense, in a company environment, I think being a woman in tech is not easy. Tech is extremely dominated by men. It's a very male-driven field and area. And so I think, especially trying to be a technical woman in a room full of all men, like in my career, the amount of times that I'm the only woman in the room of all men, and I'm not an engineer, but I'm a product person or very technical. And so it's kind of like double, and it's hard. You always have to overprove yourself. And you're just completely ignored, or, I think there's so many times I've felt like, you really have to stand up, or you always feel like you have to be the nice person in the room. And so I think it's something that's getting better for sure. I think you definitely see the change. I think it's getting better, but I think especially being a woman in tech and a woman of color in tech, it's challenging. And so, but again, I think it's getting better, and I think it will continue to get better. And luckily, founding your own company is an easy way out, not having to deal with that.
Yeah, thank you. So Manpreet, this next question is for you. How are you navigating networking right? What are some best practices for making the most in this digital era? And what are some things that you've learned along the way from the past few years?
So I'm probably a little unique just because, my business and my profession is I run an investment firm. We have over 600 investors in the firm and our investments. And so I'm constantly talking to our LPs and hosting investor calls and so forth. I think I can talk about what happened, pre-COVID and I guess during COVID. Pre-COVID, I was really good at, I went to the Middle East for a meeting with investors and conferences. So I was really focused on, making my trip there for 3 weeks and going to as many countries as I could. And I would, there were situations where I would fly into countries just for 24, 48 hours and do 20 meetings and out. And so what I learned early on in my career was that an in-person meeting is critical, right? Especially if you're dealing with folks that overseas. And so I was a big believer in in-person meetings, and that making the effort, whether it means getting up at 3 a.m. to catch a flight because there's only one flight to enter that country, you have to take it, right? And whether it's doing your diary and do your plug at the airport or wherever you are, because you don't there's nowhere else to do it, right? In many cases. And so that was a big thing that I did. So I would just try to meet as many people as I could. And I think during COVID now, I think that Zoom has been very helpful. I think WhatsApp has been really good for me. For a lot of folks are very, very busy, and you can share a lot across to CEOs of public companies and get them to respond, because most have gaps in their day or have a few minutes to catch up and talk about something. But getting it scheduled sometimes can take weeks, right? But if you can catch the person at the right moment, I think WhatsApp and other tools have made it a lot easier for me to kind of network and connect with folks.
Yeah, thank you. So just quick reminder to all of our listeners here today, there's a link in the chat where you can submit your questions that we'll be asking in about 30 minutes. So you can submit your questions directly to ask each of our panelists. Moving on, Savneet, since you have such a unique experience, I have a question just for you. So how do you deal with situations when the business or a project that you're working on isn't moving in the direction that you want it to?
Wow. Well, listen, I think everything is a problem. You just have to. So the way I usually go about things is I start with the outcome, and then we kind of work backwards and figure out what's not working. So I think a lot of times you get caught up in the weeds of what's not working. This person, this product, this service, and oftentimes I think you get caught up in between, and you really should be focusing on the endpoint and then working your way back to how to solve that. So that's generally how I do it. I think it's also a great way to get other people more involved because it's, sometimes I find when there's a problem or something stuck in the mud, you'll see, a few loud voices. But if you sort of step out and say, hey, well, what's the end goal? What's the outcome we're trying to get to? More people actually can understand what that is and actually add input and value and create some diversity of thought. So I usually start, let's back up, say where we want to go, and then take a relook at it and see where we messed up.
Oh, thank you.
It's just
Aman,
that's an important point. So if I can just add, I cannot stress to the young folks here enough Savneet's point on outcome versus effort. Too many of us are focused on our effort, making sure other people understand our effort, that other people are not doing enough effort. And effort is what we do. Outcomes is what businesses are looking for. So then every time you can shift your focus from your effort to the outcomes you achieved, and outcomes are achieved for customers, they're achieved for businesses, not for us individually, it's going to so help you, exactly like Savneet laid out.
Manpreet, is there anything you wanted to add?
I actually wanted to say something on the networking piece that I think is important, because it even talks about how Aman and I initially met. Folks like the younger generation, I think it has a significant advantage that we had kind of growing up, because there are social media tools where you can reach out to very successful people. And if you send them something interesting enough, they'll likely respond. And so Aman and I initially met, I think, through a tweet initially, and which led to an email exchange back and forth. And I think the one thing to remember is persistence, right? And to be persistent to try to connect with somebody or meet somebody. So I think Aman and I had to coordinate maybe 20 or 30 emails back before we were able to get a lunch on the calendar, given how crazy his schedule was and how little I was in Seattle and I'm based in DC. And so I think and a number of successful folks that I know, I think Savneet knows as well, they had an opportunity early in their career where they had reached out to someone who was, very successful, and that person gave them a chance or gave them an opportunity to meet, and that was a pivotal moment in their career. So I would highly recommend, if folks here are interested in certain areas or careers or certain subjects, use the tools at your disposal and try to get folks interested. And you'll have an opportunity to have a 10, 15, 20, 30-minute meeting or call with them.
Yeah, thank you. Diviapreet, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think I agree. And I agree in the networking piece as well. I think something, especially at that young age, and I think a lot of the things we've been talking about today is kind of what to do, what you wish you did more. I think like networking is just, don't be afraid to, I say this to anyone who reaches out to me for mentorship or questions. It's like, do not be afraid to reach out to anyone. I think especially in the Sikh network, we're really lucky that Savneet always says this, is that like, Sikhs are really lucky that like we have there's a very strong majority of Sikhs who are extremely successful and in every industry. And like, every Sikh, and you're more likely to get help and like a lot more help from a successful Sikh person than you are from like an average random person you're going to reach out to. So I would say like, do not be afraid to reach out. Like successful Sikh people like really, really, really want to help young people, because that's also probably how they got there as well. Because it's kind of like everyone pays it forward. So I think that's really, really critical. And again, it's so easy. You just send a LinkedIn message. It's the easiest thing. Send a Facebook message. Send an Instagram message. It literally takes 2 seconds. And so I think if you think you're interested in a potential company or space, like reach out, like ask someone a question. Hey, I want an internship. Like the chances of maybe you're not going to get an internship, but you'll probably get some really good advice and make a good impression that could change your career later on.
Absolutely. The power of Sangat is just unmatched. Our community is so tight knit, and it's such a blessing. And so yeah, go ahead.
That was it.
Okay, so speaking a little bit about Sikhi, this is a question for the entire panel. Could you please give us a little bit of perspective on how your relationship with Sikhi has influenced your career? Aman, I would love to start with you.
Yeah, the fundamentals of the Sikh religion, I think, prepare us really, really well for the world today. I felt that being a Sikh was an advantage for me from the very beginning. And I'll split it into 2 things for you. The first is the teachings, the learnings, which, from the idea of equality within genders, within people, all the way to, celebrating together and, to come together as a Sangha, to come together as a group and celebrate one's success. There's like 100 things in the middle or more. And all of those relate really, really well to how we work today in this knowledge worker economy, right? Because the fact is that a lot of the things that people today, Divya touched on, sort of diversity in ideas, coming from different places. A lot of what we talk about today is in the fundamentals of our religion. And that's not to say that within Sikhi there aren't different points of view. There absolutely are many, many different points of view. But, at least from the little I understand, I feel like those fundamentals are really valuable. The second side of it is the sort of pride of being a Sikh. And that could be wearing a turban, that could be how you represent yourself. Different people find different ways to represent themselves being a Sikh. But that pride that one feels, just like we were saying, people reach out, they pay it forward. It's really important that everyone recognize that. And the way I usually talk to folks about it is that, when I came to the US initially, and I was working, and I was doing quite well. Number of folks would advise me. They would say, "Hey, you're going to have a harder time, sort of, as a Sikh going through the ranks, in a bank, which is corporate America, run by a certain type of people, and it's just going to be difficult for you. Do you want to change some things? Do you want to think about things differently?" And the warning almost always was that, what will happen if you do something wrong? They'll never forget you because of the way you represent yourself. It was for me partly about the way I look, but it is broader than that as well. And I thought about that question a lot, and I would say I probably thought about it for years. And after a while, I found the answer to that question, and the answer was as simple in terms of as hard as the question is, which is when after a while people ask me, well, what if you do something wrong? My answer always was, well, what if I do something right? Because the fact is, when I do something right, nobody forgets me either, right? And that's a hugely powerful differentiator for me as an individual. So, I would say both the teachings and the form, and, I think different people use different representations, no push from me on one way or second way or third way or fifth way, but it just understanding that both can help you in a huge way, I think is important for young folks.
I'll build on that in similar lines on the pride side. So I'm personally a very big believer that a lot of life is based on circumstance. I could argue I was really hardworking and I'm smart and blah, 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 but I was born in America. I had an advantage Aman didn't have. I had, parents that push education, blah, blah, blah. There's an insane set of luck that happens into all of our journeys. And, I think you're kind of ignorant if you assume that, it's all you. We tend to individualize the characteristics of those that are successful, but is Bill Gates the richest man in the world because he was smarter than everybody else? Maybe, but he also went to the second high school in America that had a computer. So he would have been great no matter what he did, but he had this unique aspect that I think made him, incredibly lucky. And he seems like someone who appreciates that and is cognizant of that. And I think for myself and for probably all of you, being born a Sikh is an incredible circumstance to be given to be successful in the business world and probably lots of other worlds. But I think it's an incredible idea that you come from a faith of martyrs. And I think whether you believe in Sikhism or not, if you grew up in the culture or the tribe, if you will, there's like a psychic residue of your ancestors that sticks with you, whether you believe it or not. But the stories your grandparents told you, your parents told you, they build up a sense of badassness, if you will, in the sense that you can take on anything, and someone died for you to be living here. And I oftentimes sometimes wonder, like, how the hell did I pull these risky moves in my life and career? Because I never seen that risky, because I guess my whole life I was told that somebody died for me to be here. Like me trying to quit my job to start a company, like that's not like, think of like the scale of the spectrum of decision making. And so I could never put my finger on it. And then when I was running our business, we started to grow internationally, and I would do this trip 2 times a year where I would leave New York City. I would go to London, Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, Australia, and then back. And I would do this like twice a year. And, the first, second or third time I did it, I started meeting the Indian community, the Sikh community. And in every one of these countries I went to, I was always really surprised. I was like, wow, I land in, London, and obviously everyone knows the success of Sikhs in London. And then I end up in Singapore, and they're like, oh, do you know the richest man in Singapore is a Sardar? And I'm like, really? And the guy and then I was like, and then they're like, yeah, and did you know the first member of parliament who was of Indian descent was a Sikh? And I was like, really? And then I go to Hong Kong, and they're like, oh yeah, the 2 richest foreign-born people are Punjabi Sikhs. And I'm like, what? And I go to Sydney, and they're like, yeah, the first parliamentarian who's from Asia is a Sikh. And I'm like, this is really interesting. And so all these countries, and pretty much across the diaspora, this unique community has always been the first to achieve economic success, the first to achieve political success. I do not believe any of that is genetic. I believe that it's cultural. And so I think we're all the same, black, white. I think we're all exactly the same. But there's no doubt, whether you go to Kenya, whether you go to any part of the diaspora, that this little small community that is a minority has been very successful. And America is probably an incredible representation of that. And so because I don't believe in genetic superiority, I simply believe that psychic residue of your ancestors that is imbued in all of us, whether you believe in, you do your bot, whether you believe in it or not, it's kind of just within all of you. And, I think you can't lose sight of that. And so I think you've been given a unique advantage that you have to appreciate. And if you believe that, by the way, the only lesson you should take is you should create that circumstance for somebody else, whether they're Sikh or not, because you have been given that gift, you should give it to somebody else.
Yeah, that's such an amazing answer. Yeah, Diviapreet, I feel like you have something to add here.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that. But I think I agree. I think psychic residue, I think for, when I think about my career and how Sikhi has influenced it, and I think I do think part of it is like I think as an Indian woman, and as, I think, oftentimes I don't think you have the confidence to have a career in technology and go live in New York City and live on your own. And like, even in the Sikh community, it's not common. And I think, why did I do that? Why did my family even let me do that? Was because I think we came from a family that was truly a Sikh family and not an Indian family. And I think that's the thing. I live my life as a Sikh woman who feels the confidence to have her own career. And I think that's really, really important. The quality that's in Sikhi is huge, and that lives within me. That confidence lives within me as a woman. And I think that in addition to that, I just think that inherently as a Sikh, you want to help others. Like that's just part of who we are. Also, I think probably like psychic residue, which that's who we are. We want to help other people. And I think that's definitely a huge part and a huge thing in Sikhi. And I see that in my Sikh friends. I see that in Park Sangat. And I think that for me in my career, I always have this check where I'm like, am I helping other people or am I just doing this to make money? And I think I always have that check, and I know that. I think I took one leap in my career where I was working, somewhere where I felt I wasn't doing that, and I wasn't as happy there, and I wasn't as happy in my career, and I didn't feel as passionate. And I think every day I do that. I do that so much more now, where I check myself: am I helping other people? Am I really helping other people, or is this just for money or success? And I think that's a massive part of how I think about it too.
Thank you, Manpreet.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I've tried to use Sikhi to my advantage, and my identity to my advantage. And I'll give you an example there. you know, a lot of times I was running a company, or I'm in the investment world now, I will attend conferences and events and so forth. And a lot of times you might be running a small company versus all the big companies that are there. And I don't have the money to spend $1 million on advertising, you know, whether it's like CES or whether it's like something else. And so we would just do tweet storms to reporters and other folks we wanted to meet. And it was as simple as look for the guy in the red turban, right? And I was probably the only guy there with a turban, or only guy wearing a red turban. And it would literally be folks just tapping me on the shoulder, say, hey, you sent me a message. And I didn't know who they were. I had no idea, but I had my team in the background sending messages, like saying things and saying, look for the guy with the red turban. And so I think use what we have to your advantage, right? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, nothing, right? So, you know, take advantage of, you know, the cards you've been dealt with.
I love that. I love that so much. So yeah, but continuing with this theme of Sikhi. So how does a Sikh who is in a position as yourself use their platform to speak up against human rights issues and different things going all around the world, but also keep a focus on what their job is and what their leadership things lead to? I would like to start with either Aman or Manpreet, whoever would like to answer.
Well, it's not, Saib, it's not a trade-off, right? It's not like you do one at the expense of the other. You know, to me, you know, working, and it is important, you know, similar to what Savneet said. What I usually tell people, either like what you do or do what you like. Either way, don't complain, you know, because either you love what you do or you can fall in love with it. You never know, you know, things come into your life that you don't think you're going to like, but you end up liking. You know, so when you're working in that way, it's sort of almost like it's not conscious. You're almost working subconsciously because you're thinking about it all the time and ideas pop into your mind. And who you are, and the fact that, you know, the idea of equality is built so sort of at the core. You know, as a Sikh in my family and with my parents and grandparents and so on, you know, I feel like if you're asking me how I do one at the cost of the other, it's like you asking me how I breathe and, you know, digest food at the same time. Like, I don't have to do anything to do either. Like, there's really zero trade-off here. You know, for me to show up to support underrepresented minorities, for me to show up, you know, in any way supporting equality is super easy. I mean, it's one of the things I loved about the GoDaddy mission when I joined it. But, you know, people talk to me about diversity, and, you know, before video conferencing and Zoom was a big deal, you know, I would often show in front of people and they didn't know I was a Sikh. They didn't know what I looked like. And it wasn't uncommon for them to talk to me about all this. And, you know, I would just not say too much. And then when I finally saw them, I said, hey, look at me. I grew up diverse. What are you talking about? You know, it's like, just look at me for a minute. And so it just, you know, it's just part of who we are. And we really don't have to make any trade-offs here.
Yeah, absolutely. Manpreet, Savneet, Diviapreet, did you want to add anything here? Okay, so we'll be moving on then to the next question, shifting gears a little bit. Just a quick remind. Oh, sorry.
One small thing, which is, you know, as you get older and move up in your career, this actually is, you know, ironically harder, right? You know, because you technically have more to lose. And, you know, I remember, you know, early in my career, the Black Lives Matter movement had started, and you know, and I you know, tech companies are oddly uniform, but, you know, the company that I run is not. There's a relatively strong basis on both sides of the political spectrum. And, you know, I was not in one of those workplaces where everybody was supportive of Black Lives Matter. In fact, the office I am is actually the opposite. And, you know, so I think that it was one of those few moments in my life when we do a town hall every Monday ever since COVID. And, you know, it was like one of those times when I was like going to wuss out of it and just sort of like give like a PC answer and, you know, say, yeah, no, everyone has the right to protest, just don't want violence. And like, and, you know, I just remember it was like one of those times where like Sikhi actually had an impact. And I was like, man, like my mom would like slap me if I didn't like say something, you know, that was actually on my heart. And so my own opinion, and I couldn't agree more with what Aman said, you are, you know, you were born to do this, right? That's literally why we were sort of, I feel like the entirety of our faith was to fight for others, to speak up when there's injustice. And it's harder and harder as your platform gets bigger sometimes to do that. But I think you have to do it from like, I always say like, do it from the spirit of like logic, and then you tie in your own personal like emotion to it, which is like, hey, I know what it's like to be the guy in the plane that everyone's looking at. And, and I know how awkward that makes me feel and how much I don't want my children to feel that way. And so this is not about, this, that. And so anyways, I think I mean, it's so right that you're born with it, but I can tell you it gets harder and harder because you have more to lose. You have more vested interest against you saying that.
Yeah, 100%. So I think we're at the point of today's panel where we're going to be moving on to the next section, which is the audience questions. A lot of you have submitted some amazing questions, and we still have some time left. If you want to submit the questions, there is a link in the chat box. So I think the first question is from Arjun in Arizona, and I would love to start with Savneet in this because you did mention the unique experience and the unique journey that you've had. And I think this is something that I struggle with as well. So how do you choose your focus in a world when you have so many different opportunities at any given time? How do you know what to pick and which direction do you go?
Oh man, I'm the worst guy for this. I've not mastered it. I think I'm going to not answer that question specifically, but give you a piece of advice. Those that are incredibly smart and intelligent, which is everybody here, you have the burden of being smart and intelligent, which is you're probably pretty good at anything you pick. And the worst thing you can do is like try to do 3 things at once, because no matter how smart and crafty and creative you are, you're going to end up being pretty good, but you lose the opportunity to be great. And when I was younger, I was a competitive tennis player, and it's kind of a lesson that stuck with me. And I got very good at tennis very young, very quickly. We were super competitive, traveling around the country, all that stuff. And I think I was 14 or something, and my dad said, all right, like, we're going to ship you to Florida. You're going to go to tennis academy, you're going to drop out of school, and you're going to go try to become a pro. And it was that sort of idea of like, go all in or don't do it at all. And I like stressed about this all summer. Like, it was like, I like avoided my dad for like a month. And, I waited really till like the last day. And I remember sitting with my dad and be like, Dad, I think I want to be like a doctor like you. And I don't know if I want to be a tennis player and, drop out of school. I really like my friends. And, my dad, to his credit, he didn't like do the soft handed, like, okay, whatever you want. He was like, he was very much like, you got one life to live, go be the best. And even though I didn't take that advice then, it really stuck with me as, and maybe an error in judgment, but you have to go all in if you want to be great at anything. So I'm not the best person to sort of give advice, but I would say if you can, really try to focus on one thing, compound that skill over and over again, and try to be great at it, because you're going to be average at 5 things, I promise you.
I don't know why you would say you're not the best person to answer that. My God, that was fantastic advice. Why would you say that? That was great.
Yeah, Manpreet, did you have something to say?
The one thing I quickly add, give it to Manpreet. I'd really encourage folks to not turn something that is a massive opportunity into a problem for yourselves. Right? My father, after partition, they came from Pakistan. They were refugees in Delhi. He grew up. He had to take any job that came along. He was one of those lucky kids at that time that could get admission into an engineering school, and there were 2 in the country, and he got into one of them. And 9 months later, they had to bring him back because they couldn't afford to send him to school. So my dad's first job was a typist in a jewelry store. His job, and by the way, this is a jewelry store. It existed in Delhi till about 10 years ago. In that jewelry store, only foreigners could shop. Indians weren't allowed in. You couldn't enter the door if you were Indian. And his job was, you come in, you maybe buy jewelry, maybe not. It was very social, and they take your address. And then his job was to type out a letter, thank you letter for coming, and then post it to them in the US, in the UK, a lot of European visitors at the time. He had no choice. He had to do that. You have so many choices, and don't turn it into a problem that now you have to choose, and how do we prioritize? And this is not a problem, guys. This is abundance. You have the gift of abundance. Don't turn it into a negative. Pick one that you like most. Go with it. If it doesn't work after a year, 2 years, 3 years, guess what? You can try again. Nothing's going to stop you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Manpreet had something to say.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So this ends up happening a lot over your career. I mean, this is a big concern. I remember when I was going to business school, there was always a challenge where you had 5 different companies presenting or hosting a dinner the same night. And so you had to choose between Apple, Google, Goldman, Marriott, whatever it was. And yeah, people were really stressed out about this. But like Aman said, like it doesn't make a difference. Just pick one. Go there, enjoy it, have a good time, and then you'll have an opportunity in the future to meet other people in the company in the future. Don't stress about it. I today in my career juggle a lot of things, and I will tell you, I have to make multiple decisions. You know, who I spend time on the phone with, or what deal I move forward with, or what entrepreneur I want to focus on. And it's definitely a very difficult decision, and I do a lot of different things, and I just try to make the best decisions I can. I move forward and don't look back.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add is I think specifically I think for like people who we're talking to right now in like college age or younger, I think what's really, really important is I agree with like, definitely get really good at one thing, but I also think like don't be afraid to try out different things too. I think like at this stage of your career life, you can take a leap, take a risk, and you know what doesn't work out? Okay, try something else. So I think it's also good to expose yourself and to try different things. And I think especially in college, there's so many ways to do that. You can get exposed to so many things, take advantage of it now, because it gets harder as you get older to take those risks, to do those different things, to expose yourself in that way. So I feel like now is the time to do it, and you can do it now, and don't chicken out. I think like that's what I would say is like, try everything.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on, we have our next question from Tejpal from Palo Alto. It's kind of a long question, so I'm going to read this out. Startups are a depth-first search, but college seems to be all about breadth. And while the Zuckerbergs of the world do exist, the average age of a successful founder from top incubators is 45. So do you advise young people to focus on investing in themselves in their 20s, whether it's graduate school, interning at a company, growing the network, or is there an ideal time to make the dive into becoming a CEO or founder?
I would say there's no one answer for everyone on that. There are folks that just have it inside of them. They can't even wait to finish high school, and they want to start their own thing, and those people should just go and do that, and that's what they're meant to be. And there are going to be others who want to go work for one of the big companies, gather a ton of experience, get to know something really, really deeply, and then do it or do something different afterwards. There's nothing wrong with a career that starts with a startup and your own company and it never changes. And there's nothing wrong with a career that never begins a startup of your own. I think both are, it just depends on the individual.
I think also it's the type of thing, like I know for me, like if you asked me 5 years ago, would you start a company? I'd probably say no. Like I never in a million years thought this was going to be my life. I remember my dad, because my brother founded his own company, and my dad was always like, you're going to do it next. You're going to found your own company. You got to do it. Be a woman. I'd always be like, I don't want to do that. I don't ever want to do that. I see how hard he works. I don't want to deal with it. And then for me, it was really like the right opportunity happened at the right time. And I really was passionate about it. And it happened for me. Definitely not the path I thought I was going to go down. So I think it's really also just about what's right for you at that time. I think especially being a founder, it's not like you don't get promoted to being a founder. You are a founder. Like that's your destiny. That's the choice you make. And so I think it is the kind of the cool thing right now to be like a founder and work in a startup. I know it's definitely like the cool thing, but it's hard. And it's something that if you're going to do that, you have to be so absolutely passionate to give up everything in your life to do it. And you really, it's like a marriage. You're giving up, you're changing everything. And if you're going to make that commitment, you're not going to do it lightly. I will say probably doing it at a younger age, it's probably be a lot easier. I 100% wish my co-founder's, 5 years younger than me. And I'm like, I wish I was younger. I wish I wasn't married right now. It'd be so much easier. I wish I wasn't like, there's so many things where I'm like, doing it earlier and taking that, I'm saying this a lot, is taking that risk earlier is a little easier. It gets harder as you get older, but I think it's, again, what Aman said, it's like, it's different for everybody. And I think that like, if the time's right for you, it'll happen. But make sure it's something you're really passionate about if you're going to do it.
I would say the same thing. Doing it earlier is probably the move that I would suggest. I followed a very traditional finance path, and I remember when I would meet with potential clients, and they would have this like checkbox of what they would check off, like things that matter. Like it was like, when I was in college, I realized I had to get like a CFA. So then did you have a CFA? Did you have a MBA? Did you have 10 years or more of experience managing investments? And what's changed in the last 10 or 15 years is that checklist is thrown out now. It doesn't make a difference, right? A lot of folks are starting things a lot earlier than they ever would have. And so I remember I was like, I have to wait 10 years. I have to get my CFA. I have to get my MBA. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to get this title. A lot of that doesn't matter, honestly. Now, I think, you know,
I think
if you really want to do it.
We're making a problem out of an opportunity here. Like, I think this is the worst thing to do is say, I'm going to go take a class to be an entrepreneur, then become an entrepreneur. Like, I couldn't think of a worse idea. And, you know, I think the best entrepreneurs never said, I wanted to go start a company. They got obsessed with a problem. And then, you know, that problem is what that itches what they wanted to scratch. And I think that those are truly the best entrepreneurs. And so my sincere advice is, and by the way, when people come to me and say, I started a company, I literally try to scare them out of it. I'm like, man, do you know how long you're gonna make no money? Do you know you're not gonna see your like brother or your parent? Like, it's gonna suck. And, you know, I also refer them to my friends who wasted 5 years, not wasted, but spent 5 years and didn't work out. And that's like, and then if that still doesn't scare you, then you should go do it, because you really want to do it. You're not doing it for all this other reasons. So, but I would say, you know, don't go to a class and say, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur. Like, if it's in you, it's in you. If it's not, you know, you can still do it later on in life, but I wouldn't force it. You know, just don't make a problem out of a great opportunity. Just go learn and find something you're interested in.
Yeah, thank you. So our next question comes from Amar Singh, and he says, looking 5 years from now, what guidance would you suggest to be, what would be the most beneficial skills to learn? So based on like technology changes and society changes in the next 5 years, what are some things to focus on?
You know, at least for me, the core skills have not actually changed in the last 5, and I'm not expecting them to change in the next 5. The core things that I think make people successful is they're curious, they have grit, they have the ability to learn. That's the number one thing. They you know, I'm a big believer in the idea that the Japanese people call shokunin, which is you come in every day and, you know, you're better at your craft. You know, you should spend 10, 20 years figuring out what your craft is, and that's okay. But once you figure it out, that is what should matter. And every day you've got a decision to make. And, you know, whatever it is that you do, all you have to really do is be better than the person you were yesterday. And in that world, everybody else disappears. You're not competing with anybody else. There's no skills to achieve. You know, if there is something you're interested in, if there's a challenge that you have to meet, if there's an opportunity that you have to go after, if you have the ability to learn and you're going to be a better version of yourself than you were yesterday, you're going to get there.
Yeah, thank you. Diviapreet or Manpreet, is there anything you would like to add?
I think talking to I would say like talking to like young women specifically, I think that like, especially in I think the Sikh community, I would love to see more women in tech. I think it's young Sikh women in tech. It's like a massive, there's definitely a massive gap. And I think that it's technical skills are like a great thing to have right now. We live in an internet world. We live in a tech world, especially considering the last year we've had. And I think you will have great job opportunities. Great. I think it's like, just try it out, see if you like it, see if you don't. And I think you could really set yourself up for like an awesome career and awesome life by trying it out. I think something I would say specifically to like young women is like, try technology. It's something that's new. It's something that's different, but it's something that's going to stick around. It's going to be here for a while.
Yeah, I would answer this not so much about this. Sorry, Manpreet, go ahead.
I was going to say two things. The two things I would recommend, right? I said it earlier: sales and networking. I have a number of friends and relatives and folks that, you know, did sales early on, and I mean, in high school they worked for, you know, the Washington Post selling the newspaper, right, or whatever it was. I would really recommend that early on, because those two things are going to stick with you forever.
I was going to say you should be insanely curious. You have a complete excuse for being massively ignorant. Like you can ask the dumbest questions because you have no basis to ask a question, and like it's such an amazing, like, lucky time to be this age, because you can just literally ask anyone. You can ask Aman, the CEO of GoDaddy, and be like, you know, how's the website work? You know, and he's, you know, I mean, you literally can do that, and he's not going to think you're an idiot because he's like, yeah, you're a kid, right? And I think that is a crazy cool thing to do, so you can figure out what your inspiration is, what your passion is, and so. This is not a skill. I don't know where the world's going to go in 5 years. There's lots of great answers and articles that you can read, but take advantage of this perspective that you can gain at this age, because you will not, trust me, you're not going to get that confidence to do it in 5 years or 10 years. And then you will look dumb because you don't get the excuse for being ignorant. So now is an awesome time to take advantage of that.
Oh, Manpreet, did you have something to add?
No.
So our next question is, For many, what you've all already accomplished may seem like a lifetime peak. So what keeps you motivated, and what's the next, what is next for you? Savneet, you're already unmuted, so we'll start with you.
I think there's this concept that Warren Buffett once said, which is it's the inner scorecard, not the outer scorecard. And I think I don't know. I don't have like measuring sticks of what's next and where to what's after that. I like winning. I was on some Clubhouse chat recently, and someone said like, what's the why? And I said, I enjoy communicating with people. I enjoy this, but part of it is I also just kind of enjoy winning, and I like the challenge of doing something. I don't know what else I'll be doing. So for me, it's I don't know if I have I want to do this next and do this next and do this next. I want to be constantly challenged. I want to push the limits of what the group of human beings that I choose to associate myself with are doing, and see how far we can push ourselves. And that may stumble like into something crazy again, or maybe I'm doing this thing for the next 30 years. But I've learned to be less prescriptive of the future, because then you're not living in the moment. I don't know what tomorrow's going to be, and I can't fix yesterday, so I got to really try to stay focused on where we are today.
Awesome. Aman, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree again with what Savneet said. I think there is an internal motivation. I call it hunger, because for me, motivation and passion have to be followed by words that describe them, but we all know what hungry feels like. And if you don't know, just don't eat food for 24 hours, you'll know what it feels like. So, you feel that internal fire to do something. Probably to explain to you sort of how I think about it, if you watch the film Jiro Dreams of Sushi, there's a great little clip in it where, and there's actually, I think, a trailer for it. I can send it out to you, Saib, if you want to share with the group. I think I actually parsed a couple of different parts of the film and got approval from Magnolia to share it with folks, so you can share it with copyright. Where Jiro talks about, how he's been making the best sushi in the world for decades. And he comes in every day, and all he's trying to do is make better sushi from yesterday. And there are only 3 outcomes. It's better, it's kind of the same, and it's worse. But that daily improvement has propelled him to be, one of the best in the world. And even after decades, 2 things he knows very clearly. One, that he's ecstatic every day. He's happy every day because he's doing something he enjoys doing, right? And 2, he doesn't even know where the top of the mountain is. Forget thinking about how to summit the mountain. Like he because if you're committed in that way that I think the Japanese describe the shokunin way, you really don't know what else is out there for you to achieve, and you're only going to find it as you get to that next path. Very similar to what Savneet said. So I'm kind of fond of that idea, and like Savneet said, I might be doing this for the next 30 years, or I might be done with it in the next few years, and then something else will come along, and I'll probably be just as curious and excited about that, and it'll take my attention.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Manpreet, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say I'm in a unique position here out of the group that I'm not actually tied to like one company or one thing. So I have probably one of the first times in my life, as being an adult in the last 20 years, in the last 2 years, I was able to kind of do whatever I wanted to do, right? So I wake up doing whatever I want to do every day, which is an awesome feeling. And so for me, it's actually more of a game, and it's just a challenge. Like, hey, look, I get an opportunity to talk to the CEO of GoDaddy today. Can I convince him to do something with me, right? Can I convince him to talk to me, right? And so it's more of a game more than anything else. And then the other things I get involved with, it's, well, I've never done that before. And so then I reach out to my network and find out who knows something about this opportunity or this space. And it's like, well, can I get educated on it? Can I get educated enough that I want to do it, and then convince other people they should do it also, right? So for me, it's honestly a game. Like, I'm just doing it every day, seeing what happens, and just trying to do more and more of many different things.
Yeah, awesome. Savneet or I'm sorry, Diviapreet, you haven't answered. Is there anything you would like to say?
I think for me, it's I'm definitely a little earlier in my career, and I think like for me, I'd say I'm definitely still like reading a lot, listening to podcasts, like seeing learning as much as I can, and that motivates me a ton. I also think because I am so early in my company's, a year or 2 years old, I still need, I have to eat, sleep, and breathe it to make sure I get to tomorrow. And so you don't have a choice to not be motivated at this stage of your company. You just don't. If I that's one thing I learned very early on as a founder is if I have a bad day, if I'm off for one day, it literally holds the entire company back a day. Which in the small trajectory, and you only have a certain amount of money, that really, really, really matters. And that's what motivates me is I have a huge impact, but arguably I'd say that's anywhere you work. If you think you don't matter, but anywhere you work and anything you do, if you're behind one day, in some way it's holding the company back in one day. You're part of a team, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. The other thing I would say that I learned, I'd say as I got older in my career was Sangha. It comes down to Sangha. It's who are you surrounding yourself with? If you want to grow in your career, in your life, surround yourself with people who are doing the same thing, because you're going to help each other out. You're going to learn from each other. You're going to motivate each other. But if you're hanging out with people who, aren't, I think you're less likely to do it. You're going to be motivated by the people who are around you. And I think that really, really matters. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Thank you. Manpreet brought up something really interesting about how, he's on a call with Aman and maybe they'll do a project together. So this next question fits beautifully. Gursimran asks, how do you develop trust with your investors and create a real network that lasts? Manpreet, I would love to start with you, or Aman, I see you unmuted. Go ahead.
Well, the question should be for Manpreet, but I just wanted to add, he's right about everything he said. He's given me way too much credit about those 20 emails and organizing lunch. It was all him. He is the sales guy. He will call you 20 times and make something work. That great, he's phenomenal. If you can learn that from him, if you just learn that from him, you will be successful in your career. You don't need anything else, I assure you.
In terms of building trust, I would say that it's you have to get to know them outside of why you're talking to them at the exact moment, right? So it's got to be around something else. So one of the things that I do, I think, and then I think some of you guys have been some of the calls with me or meetings with me where I've done this, where the first thing I try to do in almost the first minute of the conversation, I try to find a common connection. Whether it's a school that we went to, or whether it's where we grew up, or whether it's a common person that we both know, because then they open up, right? And they're more willing to talk, and they're more willing to be truthful. And so my last call of the day on Friday, I had a call, which I was late on. I was 10 minutes late, and I think they called a couple of times. I think they were annoyed, as a favor, they're doing this call for me, and it's a big family office, a big investor. I just got caught up with something. And I quickly was able to turn it around where he was annoyed to have to talk to me as his last call of the day. And instead he spent 1 hour and 15 minutes on the phone with me, right? Because I quickly found a common connection. I actually found 5, which was, I think for him was mind blowing, right? And I'm really good at able to do it because I talk to a lot of people. I know a lot about a lot of different industries. I think for you as young people, you guys have unique skill sets, whether it's through social media or whether it's through sports or other things where you can connect with people. So try to use that to your advantage, right? Try to get early on in the conversation where they can trust you or get to know you and be able to do something with you. And you might not do something with them, today, but you might do something with them 10 years from now, right? So I think for me, it's always been about the long game. And I honestly want people to, this is like a lifetime thing. For the rest of my life, I'll be talking to folks and helping people on different things, right?
Yeah, thank you. Savneet or Diviapreet, is there anything you would like to add?
I'm not a good networker in the sense that it requires lots of follow-up. And I am one of those guys, I'm just so into the work that I'm doing that it never takes a priority over, getting coffee with another employee or a customer. You know what I mean? It's just, it's always secondary. But I would say I'm a really good first date. And, I always say to Manpreet, I'm probably the best referrer of clients to Manpreet because, I'll go to a meeting with no desire to network. And so I think the sincerity is the intellectual point of the conversation, right? What's your business? What's your technology? Blah, 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 blah. And then I'm on to the next thing. And I wish I was better at keeping that connection. Honestly, sometimes I'm oh my God, I wish I stayed in contact with someone. But I've kind of given up trying to force myself to do that because it's never really, I've never been good at it, at the follow-up. But, I would just say my best advice for the relationships that I've built is to just be honest, be who you are. And I think people see that, like I think last week or 2 weeks ago, I called Aman and said, man, I got to redo my org chart. Like, what do you do? And, he was, and he's a brother, so obviously it's a little different with him, but, people, if they think you're not using them, and, I think people tend to like want to be helpful and be supportive. So anyways, my advice is like, don't try too hard also. You should definitely follow up. And Manpreet is probably the best guy following up. And he's got a brain that can actually remember all the follow up. Although I wonder if it's all his interns, I can never figure that out. But, I think don't try too hard. Be yourself, ask honest questions, because people can see right through it with you're doing it just to build some tenuous connection to get something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Diviapreet, would you like to add anything?
Yeah. So investors for me is like a very new thing over the last couple of years. It was not something I dealt with before, and it's something that is challenging in a lot of ways. I think as an early company, a small company, going in and asking someone for a massive check is not easy, especially for a women's company. I think is really hard. A woman and going into a women's company, it's really challenging because oftentimes either they're like, I don't understand the problem. Why am I talking to you? Like, you're too young, whatever it is. It's challenging. I agree with Manpreet. Finding common ground is really, really important. And I think it's something that definitely helps the conversation. I do think as a woman though, going into those conversations, sometimes you kind of have to be a little less friendly, which was really challenging for me because I'm extremely bubbly and I love to talk. And so oftentimes I have to control my tongue and like be like, just, completely have a stern face because that's what they don't want to bubble. They when you bubbly, then they're like, oh, she's flighty. She probably doesn't know what she's doing. And that was something that's really hard to like wrap your head around as a woman and a woman in business and be like, I'm just as good as any other man who's going to walk in here, but I have to change the way I act because I am a woman. And so that was something that was really a huge learning curve for me. But I also agree with Savneet. He's given me that same advice multiple times is, be really honest. I think also as a young and early startup, oftentimes BSing your way through things is kind of just how you got to get it done. And I think it's really hard when you're an investor to kind of control, like not BS and like be really truthful and know your metrics in and out and being able to talk about it. But again, like you kind of what Savneet is saying is being really natural. Like you never know what they're going to ask you. Sometimes it's like it's super intense and sometimes it's just a really chill conversation. But ultimately, like what I've also learned is they're investing in you. Investors are investing in who you are, not just your product and not just what you're doing. So they have to like you. And they're going to be around. So make sure you like them too. That's a conversation my co-founder and I have a lot is just because someone's going to give you a check doesn't mean you have to take it. There's been recently even someone wanted to give us a massive check and we were like, they're just kind of jerks and we didn't like them and we're not going to take that check. And okay, it's going to be a little harder for us to get, got to hustle a little more to get the next check, but that's okay because you should like who you work with. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, thank you so much. So as Manpreet, did you want to add something?
Yeah, one thing I would say, try to add value. So a lot of times you're meeting them to accomplish something that's going to help you out. A lot of times they may not invest because there's something else that's bothering them or they have issues. To try to add value to them, right? Get them a lot of times if you can dig deeper and find out why they're not investing or what they're focused on, maybe they're busy on some other project, help them with that project, right? We've been in situations where there's folks that we wanted them to invest with us, but they were really excited about gaming, for example. I happen to know one of the best gaming funds in the country was raising at the exact same time. So I connected with them to the gaming fund and they invested $2 million with that company within a few weeks, right? And so I didn't benefit from it at all, but they'll remember for the rest of their lives that they wanted to invest into an opportunity and I got them in front of that opportunity in a very short time period, right?
Yeah, thank you so much. So as we're closing up we'll have our last couple questions. So a lot of our participants are high school, college students, and they're hopefully soon going to be looking for internships and jobs and things like that. So what do you look for specifically when hiring people? I'd love to start with Aman. Haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, happy to share. And we've been talking about some of the things we want to see in people, right? The ability, the curiosity, the ability to learn, the grit, right? Examples that bring that to us. But a lot of you are going to be in the position that Manpreet, I think, was earlier talking about, that you're going to be talking to multiple companies. So equally important is how you decide what you want to do. Right. And I actually feel that if you are super clear about what you want to do, you'll put yourself into the right interviews and the other side will understand exactly what you want to do. Because one of the, oddest things about trying to hire somebody is when they have not really spent any time thinking about what they're really going to do for you. And that happens a lot when you're young, right? And of course, we hire people anyway. But for folks that can have a better direction, I think it can really help you. And for helping organize your thoughts, it's literally the number one question I've gotten over the last 10, 15 years of mentoring folks. And I turned it into a formula and I call it the soulmate test, which is the letters SOUL, because you're going to work so much and likely so hard. It's like if it's not a soulmate for you, you're not going to be happy. And what those letters stand for is that the thing you want to choose, you want to have something that you're hungry for, and not just passionate, not just motivated. It's something that you're hungry for. You feel that burning feeling inside your body about it. The O is that there should be opportunity for all. And I think somebody talked about, it's not just about looking for opportunity for you. I think it was Savneet talking about Bill Gates. Many of us, including me, we're riding great waves. The way I lead companies, the fact that, computers talk to me in a manner that they don't talk to other people would have been skills that might have been useless 100 years ago, right? But I'm riding a huge wave that's allowed me to be successful. I was lucky enough to be born at that time, just like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs were to be born at a certain time. So, the way to find those waves is look for places where there's opportunity for lots of folks, and you'll find those waves. The U is that you must bring something unique to the table. There must be something about you that gives you a competitive advantage in that role. And the L is that it must involve learning for you, because if it doesn't involve learning, it's not going to be a good long-term choice for you. So if you think through those 4 letters carefully, you're going to find yourself applying for jobs that make a ton of sense for you. You're going to find yourself being really articulate as you talk about why you want that job, and you're going to have a lot of success getting it. I've given this advice to lots of people. They've used it. I was tapped about 18 months ago to come be CEO of GoDaddy. I really did not know much about GoDaddy. I thought GoDaddy was just a domains company. I looked into it and found out, oh my God, it's a massive company that does so many other things, right? The board asked me 9 questions. They gave me 90 minutes for the interview. I literally, my sister-in-law's cousin was getting married in Chicago. I went from the New York Times board meeting to Chicago to the wedding, overnight to San Francisco to interview for the GoDaddy CEO job. I got there at 2 a.m. in the morning. My interview was 7:30, right? 90 minutes, 9 questions. I answered them all using the soulmate idea. I broke them down, those 9 questions, into SOUL. And 45 minutes in, I knew they were going to offer me the job, because I could feel their engagement, I could see that I wasn't answering their questions on what they wanted. I was telling them what I wanted super clearly, and they wanted that.
Yeah, thank you. Manpreet, I saw that you unmuted. Do you have something to say there?
I would say for me, it's a little bit different. So I believe that I want to give as many people an opportunity to kind of work with us or do an internship or maybe a job. And so I usually tell people, hey, if you're serious about wanting to do something with us, how many hours can you put in? How quickly can you put those hours in? What do you think you're good at? What do you want to do? And I asked them to try it out, right? I think Samrit, who's here, and a few others who have interned with us in the past, like I quickly give people, if people quickly realize whether they want to do it or whether they don't want to do it, or this is not for them. The other thing I would recommend you do is you could also just do a lot of interviews, a lot of companies, right? So when I was thinking about what I wanted to do around when I was in business school, I knew I probably wasn't going to be finance. I want to do investing, but I did a lot of interviews with Google and Apple and a bunch of these different companies just to kind of see what they would ask, what they wanted to, what kind of roles they were looking for, just so I can get to learn, about those opportunities.
Yeah, Savneet or Diviapreet, is there anything you wanted to add?
One thing I'll add is something I used to look for a lot when I was interviewing for product manager roles, or even previous roles I was interviewing for as well. When I would be interviewing people, I think something that I'd always look for is that this person is, and even now, I mean, look for that now too when I'm interviewing, is like they're completely passionate about the company and not just about the actual job. Like, is this person willing to make photocopies as well as do the job that we're hiring them for? And I think that was always the test when I was at ZocDoc, was like, okay, but like, do they really care? Like, do they want to be here? Or do they just want the paycheck? And I think that was something that always came across as something we always looked for, especially in the startup culture. I think that like you have to be okay doing everything. I think right now, one of the things I'm doing a lot is because we are a small company, we're a small startup, and that culture thing matters. It matters that this person wants to be here. It matters this person wants to work the crazy hours, and that they're going to be a part of the team. So what we've been doing lately is just trial periods. Are you willing just to work with us, a few hours a week just to see how it goes? And we'll potentially give you equity or give you an opportunity if it works out. So we've just been giving people a trial period and they're willing to do that. Then we're like, all right, you're probably see how it goes. So that's something we've been doing lately. But I do think that like that passion comes through, that you really do care not just about the job, but the company itself and the company's vision.
So I really like Aman's soul-made idea, which I'll Google and research. But I think it's a better way to go about it. You've been curious, having your unique why is there. I think general characteristics, internships are like, they're so hit or miss. We're doing our MBA intern interviews this week, and this is gonna sound horrible, but like, we look for like PSDs, poor, smart, driven. And poor is probably the wrong word to use, but the idea is that, you have nothing to lose. You're willing to throw it all on the line. This idea that, I think you have to be, what Divya is saying, that resourcefulness, the humbleness, to really just jump in and do it, whatever it takes. That really matters. As far as getting a job, which I think was actually the part of the spirit of the question, because I think it is hard to get an internship, and we've tried a lot to help people in the community. Everything you've heard here, but like number one is like, you can't be shy. I mean, no job is going to like come to you. Very, very few people have that opportunity. So you've really got to make it happen, and you've got to go through your career alumni. You've got to go through your Sikh alumni. You got to go through every which way, but don't be shy, and don't there. And then I'm going to repeat the thing I've said, probably 4 or 5 times here, which is, if you can find that industry category job that you are really into, like it'll come through, and you might not be the expert in it, but it will shine through. And so I would, think that. And then if you're blessed with choice, my biggest piece of advice is, go where you're going to learn the most. So whether that's if you're going to go be the chief of staff for Aman, then like go do that, or you're going to go to a company that's growing 10,000% year over year, then go there, because you'll learn a lot. And so optimize for that, as opposed to, going to Goldman Sachs because you're getting paid a lot right now. Again, this is a guy who made that decision. I would say, it was probably, it was every experience is good learning, but I would really think about those areas where you can just compound your knowledge.
Thank you so much. So my last question for this panel today is from Samrat in Tennessee. And it's a pretty straightforward question. What book has been most impactful for your personal development? Savneet, I would love to start with you, since you have a bookshelf in the back, so I think it's quite fitting.
I'm going to pass this to Manpreet. I'll come back to me.
Okay, sure. Manpreet.
One book is hard.
Or Aman, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you're on mute, Manpreet.
Yeah, the only thing I was I actually read a lot online. I don't read as many books as I probably should. But I do remember many years ago, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell was one book that I read at a time where I was getting a lot of information overload, and I had to make decisions. With investing, you're given a million decisions. Do you buy GoDaddy stock or not, right? And what decision, what information is important? And I think that book was important to kind of teach me like how to dissect and go through like the information that I think is important, and then make a decision and move forward, right? But I don't have any other books that I really recommend, honestly, outside of investing books.
Outliers, I think, was a good book. I really enjoyed that one. I'll go back actually about 20 years. It's now almost exactly 20 years that I've been studying leadership. Like, I call myself a student of how leaders work, how humans do things. And the book that made the biggest difference to me was a tiny book called Monday Morning Leadership. And the one principle in it that stayed with me for 20 years, and I've collected like 21 principles over the last 20 years, and they don't change at all actually, but the order changes a bit. And the one principle that started somewhat in the top 8, 10 and has moved to the top was from this book, and it just says, to be a better leader, be a better person. And it's really not more complicated than that.
Thank you. Savneet, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a really great question, because I would say as you get older, and I'm not that old, but I keep referring to being older. Maybe that's my way of saying I am. As you get older, it's harder to have a book impact you like it did when you were younger, and that's why picking the right books now is really important. I'm in my 30s, and I'm already like, I will never be able to get through the books that I've already downloaded or bought or I have on Audible, and I'm like, and that scares the heck out of me, which is there's too much knowledge in the world to consume, and I actually will not get through it all. And I'm a voracious reader, and I always have been, and so there's a lot of books that impact me, but I think picking the right books now is really important because they have so much more impact now because you just they set all your ways of thinking. So I'll give you a few that are like business minded. So Outliers, I like the other two said, it's probably the book I've given out the most, but for totally different reasons than Manpreet suggested. And that for me, it was that idea that what I took from it was that idea of circumstance, of how the idea that the month you were born in had an impact on your career. This conceptually, the idea that many lawyers are Jewish was historically like some stereotypical or almost overtly racist remark was actually because of a structural issue, societal issue, right? And so that book had a lot of interesting things, but that's what really stuck with me was like, man, luck or circumstance, just crazy things have happened. And all of you should realize that too, right? Like, I'm sure when you see your friends who are smarter and harder working than you, and you're like, man, like I really got a lucky deal here. I recommend that book just because I think it gives you some life perspective. This is super controversial now, but like I read all the Ayn Rand books in college, Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and they actually did have a lot of impact on me and just how capitalism worked. And obviously there's a lot of hyperbole and it's extreme, but it does give you a perspective of like that type of world. And as I got older, I've gone probably on the other end of the spectrum, but it really did teach me a lot about business and sort of how that played, and they're written in a way that they're easy to digest. So I found that was great. If you're into business, I really do think you need to read the early Warren Buffett letters. I do think there's just so much wisdom in how he used to communicate. I think now it's a little bit salesy, but I do think that there is no better textbook than the Buffett letters, without question. In my opinion, it is like an MBA if you can kind of dig through it. And then I'll give you one last one for those that are really business dorks, but it was a book called The Outsiders. It was a guy named Will Thorndike who's now become a friend. I read that book, I don't know, 10 years ago or something when it came out, and it just hit me so hard as far as what makes good CEOs and bad CEOs. And it's hard to apply, but, it's this idea of capital allocation and that sort of, he explains it in a way that you kind of just get it. So maybe buy that and read it in 5 or 10 years. But, every board I've joined, every organization that I haven't joined, it's, I usually start by making everyone read that book. So those are some that have had a lot of impact and probably the ones I've gifted the most.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Diviapreet, we'll end off with you.
Definitely recommend Outliers. I'm one of the people Savneet has given a copy to. That was the first time I read it because he made me read it. But I think for me, mine are very like tech focused, I would say. One of the ones that I read and then reread a few times since I've started my company is The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. Inspired by Marty Kagan is a great one for like product folks. Those are ones that I've read. I would also echo what Savneet said is read now, because I'm someone who, I was an English major. I read probably like no exaggeration, like 2 to 3 books a week I used to be able to do. And now I like can't finish a book in a month. I just don't have the time. So kind of like I'm on Medium more and listening to podcasts. It's like so much harder to like find time to read. So like just absorb all the knowledge you can when you can do it. It's amazing.
The other two that I would actually recommend are Snowball, the Warren Buffett book. I think it was pretty long, but I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. It had a lot of life lessons in it and kind of went through what he's done over the last 90 years, I guess he's been alive. And then Rich Dad Poor Dad was one that I really liked a long time ago, right? I think I was a lot younger, so maybe many of you guys probably read that, but those are 2 that I would also recommend.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So I actually just bought every single book that was mentioned, and I'm on my dad's Amazon account. So thanks, Dad. He's in this chat, I think. With that being said, I just want to, we're pretty much, we've gone over a little bit on time, but that's okay. I want to thank all our amazing panelists for this hour and a half and a little bit more of a lot of knowledge, insight, and sharing your experiences with all of us. And this Sangat is so important and so impactful. So with that being said, I want to pass it off to Samrat, who's going to be doing the concluding statements. And lastly, thank you for everyone for this opportunity to host this panel. So Samrat, go ahead. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I want to obviously thank all of our incredible panelists and Saib for hosting this awesome discussion. I learned a lot about wearing red turbans. Aman apparently likes Japanese culture a lot, as well as a few other things. So I really appreciate that. At Sikh Pre-College Network, we're excited to carry on this momentum, not only from this panel, but the momentum that we've had in the past 6 months. Our network has grown to 52 colleges. We've reached over 1,600 students through our programming, and we are just getting started. So I want to thank you all again for being here. And a heads up too, in our follow-up email, we'll include the panelists' contact information and ways to get involved with the Sikh Pre-College Network if you're interested in that. And before you leave, we would greatly appreciate it if you took a moment to fill out our impact survey, which I will send in the chat now. But other than that, thank you all so much, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
for having us. Bye.
I think these people all want to stay.
Yeah, we can all hang out. That's fine.
Yeah.
That or they like left their phone, like they left their device.